Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. My name is Lori, and I'm super excited today to be joined by Shanti and Dave from our DBT series, so you'll know them well. So we're on chapter 5 now, which is the effectively skill. And I personally had a really hard time with this skill. I think I didn't remember that it existed, and so it was kind of like a new one for me. So yeah, Dave, do you want to introduce the story a little bit, and then we can go into the...
Sure. This is a story... without getting into too many of the details, the idea is that there's a young woman who's getting picked up by her dad to go on a trip to her grandparents' house. And it's been a difficult relationship. Her dad, it seems, is with a stepmom who does not get along with the daughter, and including the fact that it seems like the stepmom actually whether she tried to strangle the daughter or whether they just had sort of a fight and sort of, the stepmom put her hands on her neck. It was a really traumatic thing for the daughter, and doubled by the fact that her dad, who is a psychologist, I think, and so he has a lot of his own opinions, is not willing at all to recognize that his new wife may have done anything wrong, but that, I guess more importantly, that it's not his daughter's fault, or at the very least, he's just not capable of using language that from her perspective doesn't seem to pass the blame on to her, and definitely doesn't take account of her feelings. And, like a lot of the stories in this book, it doesn't wind up with, her being best friends with her stepmom or anything like that. But the way it really ends is that they have this car ride, and she finds a way at the end to say some very factual things about, the way that she experienced her stepmom putting her hands on her neck. And even though her dad doesn't, he doesn't apologize, and he doesn't have an overt change of heart, it seems like, number one, he doesn't jump all over her in the way that he usually does. And also she comes out of it feeling, feeling better than usual about the way that she's communicated, and not feeling quite so bad about herself, partly because, the dad doesn't take the opportunity to make more comments about her in that sort of scenario. So I think that kind of covers it.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think for me, first of all, the story itself actually was somewhat interesting in that, the whole concept, at least in the way that I read it, was that it's about kind of weighing out the is it needed for me to react, or can I just let it go? And is my reaction going to be more detrimental to me just letting it go? And because my family dynamic is so interesting, this is my entire life at any family gathering is I'm just gonna not because it is not worth interacting, or not worth engaging with the conversation. Because this story actually had a lot of specific BPD focus around stigma, not that the book was stigmatizing, but that the father in the story was really stigmatizing. Yeah, so it was a relevant story for me. How about you, Shanti?
Yeah, this is my favorite story so far too, and it was very relevant too, and I highlighted a lot in the story. I really liked how she explained it and explained who Marsha is, and how what she believed. And I feel like she did a really good job in the end of saying she didn't invalidate herself. She still explained what she went through, and she did it in an effective way.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you liked the story, because at the end, as much as it was relevant, I literally have a note at the bottom of my page that says, not really understanding this story. So I think, but that was when I first read it, and I feel now that I've processed it a little bit and heard both of you explain it, it is coming to me a little bit more.
How did you feel in the beginning?
Sorry, go ahead. In the beginning, I was just kind of I was okay, I relate to this story, but I don't really understand how, what the skill is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was she's just trying her best is that's a great skill, but that's kind of how it felt to me. And I was I just don't know this skill at all. So it was hard for me to see it in the story. Whereas for some things wise mind or the deer skill that we're going to talk about in a couple weeks, it was very obvious, right? It was here's the deer letter, dear man. I don't know why she calls it deer, but dear man letter. word for word, I can be like, yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. But that's also a skill that I use intentionally on a regular basis.
I thought there was sort of and it's been a little bit since I read this the first time, but I was really struck by it seems, because I was trying to think, and also when you were saying that just now, I was trying to think, like, what is it that she wants? If the point of the effectively skill is to get what you want and maintain your self-respect, then, like, what is it in the situation that she wants? And I think that it does illustrate that it doesn't have to be something gigantic, like, something really big and revolutionary. In this case, it just seems like what she wants is to communicate what happened to her dad without getting attacked in return, just to be heard. And she's able to accomplish that in the end. Again, he doesn't apologize. He doesn't say, your new stepmom is awful and I'm gonna divorce her too or something, but he doesn't fight with her. And also there's a part where she says, it's talking about assuming good intentions. And so towards the bottom of page 81, she says, Mimi thought it's more effective to assume good intentions. She decided he was trying to destroy her. It would just make her even more upset. And so, not that she has to say, not that to use the skill, I would have to say, this person's a wonderful person and they're doing things in the best possible way, and they're really living up to values that are important to me. And at the same time, if I want someone to listen to me, if I'm assuming that, like, they are out to get me, like they're out to hurt me, all of a sudden it becomes much harder to not devolve into, like, fighting back and trying to hurt them back, which I guess if that's my goal, then that's pretty effective to do that. But if there's something else I want other than just hurting this person, it's not very effective.
I liked how, I feel like in the beginning, I don't know if I'm reading this correctly, but like, I feel like her only desire was to, like, survive the trip. But then when she realized that, like, her dad was actually, like, sort of listening, like, in his own bad way, but, like, was sort of listening and being like, I didn't think about it like that. She realized, okay, I can make a difference in this time.
Yeah, I thought of that as the goal as well. Just literally get from point A to point B without blowing up or self-harming. She did that well. I know, Shanti, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I know both of us have some pretty complex, like, family situations. Do you go into situations with the goal? I know that sometimes, like, we don't necessarily interact with our family, which is probably safer for us, but, like, when you have to, do you go into that situation with the goal of, like, I'm going to just get through this and that's my goal?
Yeah, most of the time when I do have to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't interact with them much, but when I do have to, it's just, how do I not explode? Let me just
Exactly.
like take everything, like, and, like, let it roll off my shoulders, like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the same way. And what I liked is this statement that she says, it's also on page 81, but it's a little bit earlier. You're doing what you need to do in the situation you're in, not the situation that you wish you were in. And I was like, yeah, honestly, that really checks out. Like, I wish I didn't have this family. I wish that I didn't have to be at this Christmas dinner, but I am. And so how do I just stay, like, relatively calm enough to be able to survive to the day that I don't have to be around them? And because especially with borderline, and I don't know if this is, like, an unjustified fear or a justified fear, I'd be curious for your thoughts, but I've been demonized by a lot of my family for, like, my entire life, right? Like, I was the black sheep. I was the cause of everybody's problems. And so when I do have to interact with them, even though, like, I'm really vocal and, like, should, like, want to stand up for myself and be like, you guys know that I'm not just the cause of every single person's problems, blah, blah, blah. I often just, like, get really, really quiet and just kind of, like, hide physically, like, in the back of every conversation and, like, don't say anything, because I'm always under the fear that, like, if I say something and it does escalate, or if I say something and they feel like it's a verbal attack, even if it's not a verbal attack, then they're going to be like, oh, see, I told you Lori was the cause of all of our problems.
Mhm.
Right? And so, like, I think that's where the good intentions, like, I wish they went both ways, because I go into such situations hoping that I can, like, get through it, and then very quickly see that I'm being, like, not treated in a way that everybody else is being treated. And like, I don't think the intentions are good.
Yeah, it's hard to know like the balance of like how to stand up for yourself, but also like just get through the day. And I think
Mm-hmm.
like in this story, she has a good balance of that.
Yeah, I think she uses dialectics well here in that she goes, it can be true that I am kind and not kind, but like, again, that's just the reality of the world. And same with her. She kind of gives her stepmom a little bit of credit through the dialectics, and her dad, like, he might not be listening, or he might not be understanding, and he's listening at least, kind of thing, which I thought was kind of nice. So moving on from the story, is this effectively a skill that any of you use like regularly?
I have been. I have been. It's not something that I was focused on in the past so much, and then in the last few months, I'd say, especially this year, it's like one that I've probably been using more than other ones. I mean, at this point, I guess there are some that are sort of baked into where I don't notice that I'm using them, but this is one that right now I'm like consciously using, and I find that it's working. It doesn't always feel good. I think that this whole idea of, and I'd be curious to know more thoughts. I mean, you guys have already brought it up a little bit, but I understand the value for myself not approaching people like their goal is to hurt me, but sometimes people's goal is to hurt me. So I don't
Yeah.
know if you guys have any thoughts about. I don't think that means that this skill is useless, but if you've used the skill in that situation, I'd be curious to hear about that.
I think she mentions it in the book, that specific, like, it's on page 89, like when you're sure the other person's intentions are bad. And it's sort of like CBT your way out of it. Hypnotizing yourself into believing it's okay just to like get through it.
And I think one of the things that's helped me, sometimes it's the language issue. I think that sometimes the language about intentions, or, there's also this thing here too that I assume we'll talk about at some point, that I think gives a lot of people trouble, is this idea that everyone's doing their best at any given time. And sometimes it's like, on the one hand, I can conceptually think that makes sense, but on the other hand, from a practical perspective, what does that mean for my weekend when I'm dealing with who does it? You feel like they could be doing a lot better. I think there's some good suggestions in here, but I think one of the things that's helped me is to look on it not so much as like the issue of their intentions, but like, is the way the person's acting, does it really have to do with me? Or is there, even though they're like aiming their behavior at me, if I can in my mind find the kernel or the truth of, something that makes sense, where it's like, no, this is why they're doing it. And it hurts me, but it's not because I'm a terrible person and I deserve to be treated like this. I've found that makes it easier to handle some of these situations and use the effectively skill to focus on like, this is what I need to get out of this interaction with this really difficult person, as opposed to being like, oh, they're attacking me. Clearly they know that I'm a terrible person and I need to like push back on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just guessing what your situations are where this is coming up for you. We don't have to get into them, but just knowing you a little bit. Yeah, I think that also comes back to the whole, like, you're in this situation anyways, and you need to be in the situation. So don't look at like, man, I really wish I wasn't in this situation, but just like, well, I'm here now. So how are we going to get through this? And how am I going to maintain like some sort of control of the situation, I guess, maybe, but like just survival of the situation is maybe a better word, because I don't like the word control. I think that that's used against us a lot, of like, oh, you're controlling people, like you're manipulative, whatever.
Yeah, and how am I most likely to get, not to beat around the bush too much, but yeah, I mean, it has to do with, in particular right now, I'm dealing with a divorce situation with someone who I think is having a lot of their own mental health and substance related problems. And it means that like there's stuff that we have to work out. And if I go into these situations where there's something very specific that I need, or something very specific that I need to say no to, and, I start engaging in every little attack on, well, you do this or you do that, or like, you did this in the past or things, then I feel really terrible. And on the other hand, if I just completely focus on, okay, like I'm going to say no to this, and then the conversation's over, or like, I need you to agree to this, and here's why. And then once they agree, just the conversation's over. I feel better about myself, and I find that over time, it's making the interactions somewhat easier, I think.
Well, and I would assume that helps with us not getting walked all over, because I think that there's misconception maybe, but also like sometimes it's true, of like people that live with borderline personality disorder can be like very like kind of steamrolly, right? Like, I'm just gonna like talk over you until I get what I want. And I do that often, and I try really consciously to not do that, because I don't want to be that. Like, I do want to hear other people's opinions. Mine are usually right, but anyways. But like, right? But if we're using the effectively skill and like kind of using it for boundaries to say like, I'm in this interaction to get XYZ, and otherwise I don't need to associate with you because it's not helpful for me, then a lot of the time the people that have kind of like either used our BPD as a scapegoat, or have like treated us emotionally treated us really badly, in that like, you're the cause of everybody's problems, but I'm going to continue to interact with you even though I'm saying that you cause all my problems. It can help them be like, whoa, is this person setting a boundary with me of like, I'm here for XYZ. And I don't want to speak for everyone, I don't want to generalize, but like, I have probably recorded like 150 episodes with people who have borderline for various podcasts. And the first question I ask is like, do you have any boundaries? And every single person says, nope, I'm an open book. And like, I mean, there's been maybe 2 people that have like had very specific boundaries that make a lot of sense. Like, they're going through a legal battle and like they can't talk about XYZ. But otherwise, without fail, I ask the question, but I could say their answer for them verbatim. Nope, I'm an open book. I don't have any boundaries. And so when we do set boundaries, people are like, what? And I think this skill can help with that. Does that resonate with you, Shanti?
I don't know. I didn't completely digest what you said.
That's fair. It was very rambly.
To be completely honest, but like, there's actually one thing I sort of want to talk about this chapter, if that's okay. The whole we're all doing the best we can, that really is a lesson that I've been trying to learn lately. I mostly think about it when I think about my dad and how he wasn't really present after my mom passed. And it's helped my anger about him to think about it like, okay, he lost his wife too. Like, it's not just that we were abandoned and then abandoned again by him, and part of me is like sort of like mad at myself for being understanding, but part of me
That's
is
fair.
like, yeah, but part of me is like, that, and also that doesn't mean I have to spend every day with him too. Like, I can understand that he was going through something too, and also that maybe it's not the best to be in each other's lives. But it's trying to let go of that anger of growing up without that parent figure, really.
Yeah. Again, like she kind of quotes something very similar in the book, but I can understand that my dad was doing the best given the situation, and he should have done better, or he needed to do better, and I'm still upset by it. Those can all be true statements at the same time, right? And that doesn't mean that it wasn't valid or isn't valid for you to be angry about it, or angry at yourself about feeling like, yeah, maybe he did do the best that you can, because sometimes that's really annoying. You're like, just do better. I needed you.
Right.
And they didn't or couldn't. I guess we'll never know, really. I liked on page 87, and this goes really hand in hand with what Shanti was talking about. I'll try and put the actual graphics up, but so there's these 4 assumptions that we can make to help us stay skillful. So the first one is doing our best. So again, this is what Shanti was just talking about. All people at any given point or at time are doing the best they can. I always wonder about like, is it really at all points, right? Like, sometimes people are just like assholes for no reason, or like assholes intentionally, right? I'm one of them. I do that too. But still, we must do better is a second assumption. So people need to do better, try harder, and be more motivated to change. Third is solve our own problems. We may not have caused all of our own problems, but we still have to solve them anyway. So I think that's kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't want to be in this situation, but I am, so therefore I have to deal with it, kind of thing. Assume good intentions. It's more effective to assume good intentions than assume bad intentions. So I just thought that was like a helpful summary, I think, of the chapter. Because I still like it's coming to me a little bit more now. I'm not going to lie, this conversation is really helpful, but it's still not a skill that I like have in my toolbox, I would say. Not something that I even really remembered existed. Any final thoughts for the effectively skill?
Just the one thing I would say is, it's something that I've done a lot with, and it's been very helpful to me with some of these bigger conflicts I've been in recently. Again, like a lot of these, I like that she gives some examples on page 90 of like some smaller ways that you can practice this, like dealing with customer service or when you're in traffic. So some of these things where it's like, customer service, it's easy to get angry, but you're probably calling because you need something, like you really need it. And it's a situation where if you blow up, like they're probably just going to hang up on you, and you're not that like being nice will get you what you want, but like, so again, I like the way that it's not all just like, someone's, my like stepmom tried to strangle me and I'm trying to like figure out how to like survive through a car ride. It's like, you can use these every day and it'll free you up to it. For me, it's like if I have a fight with a customer service person, or like, not now, but like, it used to be if I had a fight with a customer service person, it could like ruin several days,
Totally.
where I would just be in like a black hole of like depression and feeling terrible about myself and all sorts of things. And that does make it harder to get the bigger things in life done. So all like bricks, one on top of the other.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to practice when the stakes are low. Right? If it's like, okay, well, I need to return something to Old Navy and they're being annoying about it. Well, like in the grand scheme of things, like the $15 t-shirt, not the end of the world. Why would I ruin my own like self-respect by like freaking out on these people? Because that's not going to get you anywhere. Although the annoying thing about customer service and like especially retail is sometimes it does get people somewhere, right? So like I used to work in retail and I was like always furious because I'm really, really nice to customer service people. And then you would see somebody come in and they would be like a complete asshole and they would get what they wanted. And I'm just like, you guys, we can't do this, right? Like you can't, that now they're like, well, this is how I get things. And that you have to be treated with respect too and understand that like, you deserve safety in the workplace. I don't know. That's a long story, but it's just like the stakes are low. And what's annoying is that sometimes the people that blow it up actually get what they want, even though that's not effective. All right.
An example of a dialectic.
Very true. This book, I will say, even though I've gone through so many DBT books and groups and stuff, I've never understood dialectics better than I have getting halfway through this book. So I really appreciate that. I guess we should probably say what the book is also, which I didn't say at the beginning of the chapter. So this is DBT for Life by Diana Partington. She's wonderful. She'll have been on the podcast as well by the time this episode comes out. Highly encourage that you grab it. It's truly a beautiful book, and it really helps kind of solidify skills in a new way that many of us haven't learned them. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Superfeeler podcast. Today's episode was recorded on the unceded and traditional territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps me reach more listeners like you, and we're always looking for improving the podcast. Remember, you can always stay connected with me on social media. You can follow us. The show notes will have all of the details for Instagram profiles. If you want to support the podcast and help me continue to bring great content, please consider joining the Superfeeler community on Patreon. Your support really means the world to me, and there's a variety of different options for support, including some free ones. For all information about the Superfeelers Club, which is the peer support that we run, including upcoming events and resources, head over to Eventbrite or laurieedmondson.com for more information. And if you have a topic that you want me to cover or a guest you'd love to hear from, please send me the suggestions. Always happy to hear them. Until next time, keep on superfeeling and living authentically. This is Laurie signing off of the Superfeeler podcast.